Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Happy Friday. I hope you have had a good week and are having a good opening to the weekend so far. Glad everybody can join me here. I see everybody in the chat. Hi, everybody. Hi from work, David Colby says. Anyway, so hi Azalea, hi Geek, hi Steven and Siamak and Kane and everybody. Hi, everybody who's here and Kara. As usual, I will be turning away from the live chat for a little while, starting in a few seconds, because I will be devoting my attention for the first part of the show to answering the pre-submitted. Air One Fire is here. I'm glad you can make it to the live stream instead of watching it the next day. And Isaiah as well. I saw your tweet on your post on Facebook, Isaiah, about you're watching a kind of like a dystopian, overthrow the government movie in honor of the present situation. Anyway, I'm going to be answering pre-submitted questions from my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you have something that you want me to pay attention to, hi Dana, in the live chat, after I start answering the patron questions, I won't be paying attention to the chat. So please, if you have something you want me to talk about or a question for me, or if you were going to be generous and throw in a super chat or something like that, please, if possible, hold on to all that stuff until I get through with the patron and member questions. And then I will devote my full attention for the rest of the show to the live chat. So Andy's first Ask Away as a patron. Thanks for being a patron, my friend, and glad you could make it. Now then, let us turn our attention. I will turn my attention to the patron questions, and you all can just do what you usually do and talk about whatever the fuck you feel like. And I'll just be over here doing a show. But I'm fine with it. Anyway, here's the first patron question from Lawrence of America, who may or may not be of the body. Okay, well, we'll find out when the red hour strikes, I suppose. What do you think about changing the United States into a parliamentary democracy? Instead of a president, there would be a prime minister who would be the head of the party that held a majority of the seats in Congress. The cabinet would be composed of department heads who also held congressional seats. The prime minister would be removed if he or she lost the support of Congress, and someone else from his or her party would take over. We could still have a president, but that would be a largely ceremonial office. The concept is not without problems. For instance, how would the party leader be chosen? But it may benefit third parties whose support would be needed in a coalition government if no party commanded a congressional majority. Possibly, the currently competing wings of the Democratic and Republican parties would split into separate parties that would more closely reflect voters' beliefs. Thoughts? I don't necessarily think that it's a bad idea. I know lots of countries have parliamentary systems. In fact, I think the parliamentary system is a far more common form of government in the world than the system that we have in the United States. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that system that, at least it doesn't seem to be significantly worse than the system we have. But I don't know if switching to that system would really solve many of the problems that we have here. Like, I don't know how much that would get us as far as, making our government more representative of the people, making our government more responsible to the needs of the people, making our government more democratic and less authoritarian. I feel like you would still have those, concerns in a parliamentary system that was imposed on our political parties as they currently exist. I mean, we still have a Republican Party that is leaning very, very, very hard into far-right fascism. We still have a Democratic Party that is not nearly as dedicated to stopping the rise of that fascism as it needs to be, and not nearly as bold and courageous in taking the side of the people, and especially the working people and the poor, as I would like to see it take. So, I mean, I don't know if just changing to a parliamentary system would do the United States a whole lot of good at this point, but I see nothing particularly wrong with that system, compared to the system we have. It's just, I don't know if making the switch would really do us a lot of good. David Colby, Picard Season 1 apologist. Your video about how 7 of 9 deserve better had the most inane thing I'd ever heard in it. Picard as president of the Federation? What kind of moron would write that? Like, people have parlayed remarkable military careers into political power, Napoleon, Grant, Eisenhower, etc., but I just don't see Picard doing it. However, if I was asked to make a Picard season 1 where he's president, I don't think those fans would like it very much. Here's my pitch. Picard is elected on a wildly progressive, optimistic platform, but then the show is entirely about how a state the size and power of the Federation, no matter what their ideals, always will end up hurting someone somewhere somehow. The choices at this level of political power are always vile and painful, and the entire series is about how much Picard beefs it. A lot like Grant, actually. In the end, he's a miserable, broken man. Everyone hates him, and he gets beaten in the election. I'd be pilloried by the fandom. Well, yes, of course you would. Look at how they reacted when a fucking admiral cussed him out. Like, you remember in season 1 of Picard, like the second or third episode, he goes into the admiral's office, not just an admiral, but like the commander-in-chief of Starfleet. And he says, "Hey, it's me, Picard. Give me a ship. I have a thing I need to do." And the admiral just kind of stares at him and goes, "The sheer fucking hubris." And I mean, the fucking hardcore fanboys lost their mind. How dare she talk to Picard like that? He is Jean-Luc Picard. He saved the Federation from the Borg. How dare she speak to him like that? As though he's a real person who had really done those things. Like they were trying to come to the defense of a fictional character because another fictional character in a show named after the first fictional character had given him a little bit of shit for being slightly full of himself and just kind of, swaggering into Starfleet headquarters after being gone for 10 years or whatever and saying, "Give me a ship. I have a mission." So yeah, if you did a whole series about how Picard completely fails as the Federation president and loses his reelection, like, oh my God, they would hate that. There's a certain kind of fan that is just overly attached to their favorite characters. And even if it's part of the story and it's going somewhere, like if their favorite character gets disrespected, oh, it's on. And fuck this show and fuck that character and fuck the people that made this and how dare they speak to him that way. Oh yeah, you'd be in a lot of trouble. Beth, one of the many things we kept yelling at the TV during Picard's time travel episodes was that they should go get Data's head. They need something that's really good at math. They know where Data's head is in 2024. Why isn't Data's head the first thing time travelers look for when they land in San Francisco? Do you really think that what that show needed was yet another TNG Easter egg? I feel like they had more than enough TNG Easter eggs as it was. I mean, they had an avalanche of them in season 3, but even in season 2, it's like, all right, there's enough of, old characters doing old stuff. Like, I know, I mean, it makes sense from a certain perspective, but from a storytelling perspective, no. The last thing I would have wanted, first of all, they weren't in San Francisco. They were in Los Angeles for most of the show. And I guess you could say, like, well, they had a ship with a transporter. They could have beamed someone to San Francisco instead of beaming them to LA. Yeah, okay. But from a storytelling perspective, the last thing I would want would be to devote what you would think would be at least a not insignificant amount of screen time to these characters going and picking up a reference from a TNG episode from 30 years ago. Like there was way too much of that in the show already, and making something like, Data's head is in San Francisco because of Time Zero, like something that would mean absolutely nothing to anyone but the most hardcore fans, and tying a big part of the plot of the show to that, and hoping that would mean something to people who like I think that's a really bad idea. I'm very, very glad they did not do that. Also, there's no guarantee Data's head would be there, because remember, the future had changed. So that's also the reason why Guinan and Picard, why Guinan doesn't know Picard when Picard encounters the younger Guinan in the 21st century, because that Times Arrow field trip from TNG never happened because the future was changed. So Picard and his crew never went back in time in season 5 of TNG to have all those adventures and to leave Data's head back there. So Data's head might not even be there. So there, look at that. I gave you I gave you a Doyleist explanation why they shouldn't have done that, which is the only explanation that's ever necessary. But I also, just as a bonus, I gave you a Watsonian explanation too. You're welcome. Thank you for being a supporter, by the way. Um, Brian Baker, Steve, were you surprised by the cancellation of Lower Decks? I have, like you, not found it very funny, but I thought it had a pretty strong following, especially with Trek fans younger than me. I didn't find it offensive, but I imagine that production costs were lower than a live action series. Paramount Plus is being offered up for sale, according to the business trades. Is that the reason for the cancellation? I am not privy to any inside info. I don't know what the specific reason for ending Lower Decks after season 5 was, but I suspect it's the reason that most TV shows are canceled, which is that it either wasn't making money or it wasn't making as much money as the studio wanted it to. I mean, it's in yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the production costs of it are, but I would imagine after season 5, it is more expensive to produce than it was in season 1, just because people's contracts get renewed and then people get raises and that kind of thing, which, good for them. I hope everybody involved with that show gets paid everything they can possibly get. Whether I like the show or not has no bearing on whether or not the people who made it deserve to get compensated for their work. But I think it's just a matter of the show. Yeah, it does have a following among a certain subsection of the Star Trek fan base, but it doesn't really seem to have much reach beyond that. Like it's a hit in the room, so to speak, but it's not, from what I can tell, and from just, I mean, like outside of Star Trek fan spaces, nobody talks about that show. Like nobody talks about it. It has had zero impact on the broader pop culture landscape, you know. And to be fair, most of the newer Star Trek shows have not had that big of an impact. Like Discovery made a little bit of a splash when it first started, and then it kind of receded into the fandom. Strange New Worlds has gotten out occasionally and has gotten some mainstream coverage. Not a ton, but more than is typical. And the last season of Picard, because it was the big nostalgia reunion show, it got some mainstream coverage. That was by like legitimate, like mainstream publications. But other than that, the new Star Trek stuff has mostly been contained within the pre-existing audience. And Lower Decks has definitely been an example of that. So I just feel like it probably just isn't profitable for the studio, or isn't as profitable as the studio wants it to be. I don't know if the pending sale of Paramount has anything to do with that. I'm sure it's a factor, but I think the main reason is that the show is just not popular enough and lucrative enough to justify continuing it. And that sucks, but that's just, that's show business. I mean, it sucks for people who are fans of the show. It makes no difference to me at all. Dana, happy Friday, Steve. The topic of sharing housework duties came up in my social media feed. How do you and Stuffy divide up the chores? Well, I'll tell you how me and Stuffy divide up the chores. Stuffy does whatever the fuck I tell him to do, because I'm the boss around here. I'm the head honcho. You know what I'm saying? I'm the HMFIC. You know what that means? Head motherfucker in charge. And what I say... Do you want me to... All right, Stuffy's in the dining room. He's on his laptop watching this, and apparently he's waving at me. He wants to say something on the stream, so I'm gonna just add Stuffy to this real quick and see what he wants. All right, I'm adding you in, okay? I don't have any idea what he could possibly have to say. Hi, Stuffy.
Hi, I just wanted to point out that that's not the way it works. Steve doesn't boss me around like that. I think he's just trying to impress you and talk like a big man, which he does sometimes. But no, the chores that we do together are fairly divided. I do things that I am capable of doing, and Steve does things that work for him, and we just sort of divide it up in a way that that is fair. So, wouldn't you say that that's accurate, Steve?
I mean, if you want to talk fair, okay, if you want to do this right now, Stuffy, we can do this. But it's not really all that fair. I feel like I do most of the work around here and you do relatively little. So, I mean, if we're going to talk fair, we should talk in terms of the respective workload, you know?
Well, okay, but I would like to point out that yes, perhaps my chore workload is slightly smaller than yours, but there is a mitigating factor to that perhaps you have overlooked.
Okay, what factor is that?
The factor that I'm 12 inches high.
Okay. Well, how big are you when you're straight?
I get it. That's very amusing.
All right, I have to go, Stuffy. I have to keep the show going. So I don't have time for this. Anyway, he does what I tell him. Sergeant Flux. Here's a hypothesis. What if the body of Captain Kirk at Daystrom Station is the body of the alternate timeline Kirk from Strange New Worlds Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? Could be similar to when Tasha Yar went back in time with the Enterprise C in yesterday's Enterprise. Your thoughts? I think that's a terrible idea. I hope they don't do that. I hope we never see Daystrom Station again. I thought it was one of my least favorite parts of that show. It's like, oh, look, everybody, it's an Easter basket. Look at all the Easter eggs. It's a big Easter egg basket. Oh, look, there's that thing. And now there's the Moriarty hologram. And there's this. And oh, look, it's Captain Kirk's body. And of course, they said you see the little storage locker and it says the body of James T. Kirk. And a bunch of the fucking, lore heads in the fandom where their brains went into overdrive and they're like, oh, well, obviously the first assumption is that it's Captain Kirk's body from Star Trek Generations. But what if it's Kirk from the alternate timeline from Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow because he died too? And what if they collected that? And I hope we never hear about any of that again. I would just rather, you know what? The Picard series had its run. It's over. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. Daystrom Station, what's that? We don't need to talk about that. That awful, horrible fanfic idea. Let's have a space station where they keep all of the Easter eggs. No, let's not. Let's not do that. Let's try to do a show that looks like and sounds like and feels like it was written by a grown-up. Let's do that instead. No, I think I'm not interested in that at all. I think I've heard that suggestion before, that it's actually the other Kirk from Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is a great episode, fantastic episode. And I like that version of Kirk, but he's done. He had his episode. Time to move on. Let's not reveal that he's in the deep freeze at the Easter egg station. Please. Andy Lawler. Hey, Steve. Hello, Steve, rather. I am a fan of stars of both the Trek and Wars variety, though a much bigger fan of Trek. So I'm overjoyed that the Star Wars universe is thriving over in Mouseville. Star Wars has like 17 series in production or announced and several movies in the works, all of which are things over which my middle daughter and I can bond. To say I'm dismayed at the lack of Star Trek offerings would be an enormous understatement. Trekkies now have a rapidly dwindling collection of material with 10 episodes of Discovery left and one more season each of Lower Decks, your favorite, and Prodigy. That leaves us with at least 2 upcoming seasons of Strange New Worlds, which is incredible, and the Section 31 movie, but that's it. Is Trek really that much less profitable that while Disney is throwing bushels of money at apparently every single Star Wars idea they're pitched, Paramount is cutting show after show from the Trek universe? Happy to have finally joined your Patreon. I'm really happy to have you here and glad that you are a patron. So there's a couple of things. First of all, boy, we got spoiled real fast, didn't we? As Star Trek fans, look, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I don't want to invalidate, your feelings about this, but man, I would have this is like a renaissance of Star Trek for me compared to how things were in the 90s. I mean, think about it. Like in the 90s, we had TNG and just TNG plus a movie every couple years until 93, and then it was TNG and Deep Space Nine for a little while, and then it was just Deep Space Nine for about a year, and then Voyager came along, then it was Deep Space Nine and Voyager for a little while, and then it was just Voyager, and then it was just Enterprise, and then it was nothing, right? It was nothing for like 4 years until the first J.J. Abrams movie came out. And as far as being on TV, it was like nothing for over 10 years, right? And now we've got, Discovery and Strange New Worlds. And I mean, Picard is over, and I thought Picard was a pile of crap, but Picard just ended a year ago and it's still right there. I mean, you can watch it anytime you want. Lower Decks, again, not a fan of that, but there's going to have been 5 seasons of that. Um, and Prodigy, which I think is fantastic. And there's a second season of it coming up at some point in the hopefully near future. And plus, yeah, the Section 31 movie. And don't forget the Starfleet Academy series that is in development that is going to be coming out at some point in the next few years. And all of that is just since 2017. Like, that's a lot of Star Trek. So I disagree with you that, there has been a lack of Star Trek offerings. There to me, there is the episode numbers are lower because the seasons are shorter. Like, the total number of episodes isn't as much as we got back in the 90s. But in terms of just the variety of different types of Star Trek, of different shows, we have been truly spoiled, even though I haven't liked all of it, and some of it I've positively not liked. But just in terms of just the amount of Star Trek that's been produced and the different varieties of it, I feel like we've really been spoiled as Star Trek fans since 2017 and the debut of Discovery. But the other part of your question is Trek really that much less profitable? Yes. I think what a lot of Star Trek fans don't realize is how much less popular Star Trek is than Star Wars. It's not that Star Trek isn't popular, because obviously Star Trek is popular. Star Trek has a lot of recognition in the general public, even among people who aren't regular viewers. Like, most people, if you say Star Trek, most people will know what you're talking about, at least in a general sense. So it's not like it's just this niche thing. Like, it's very popular, but it's nowhere near as popular as Star Wars. I say this as another person like you who prefers Star Trek to Star Wars, but Star Wars is way more popular than Star Trek and always has been. For as long as Star Wars has existed, Star Wars has been more popular than Star Trek. Look at the box office totals of the movies. Star Wars movies make way more money than Star Trek movies. They always have. Look at this as well. The new Star Wars stuff is being produced mostly for Disney Plus. Disney Plus, in terms of its subscriber base, is more than twice as big as Paramount Plus, just in terms of the number of subscribers. I don't know about revenue generated. I know that none of the streaming services so far have been profit makers. Like, they've all been losing money since the beginning, which is not to say that they're not generating tons of revenue. They're just not generating enough revenue to actually turn a profit. But in terms of just audience size, Disney Plus is way bigger than Paramount Plus. So, the short answer to the second part of your question is, yeah, Star Trek is that much less profitable. So, yeah, Disney is willing to throw a ton of money at Star Wars to try and capture more of that audience, because it's a much bigger audience than, Star Trek is working with in terms of like the built-in fan base. And they just have more money to throw around because they're a way bigger company. So, yeah, I think that's the general explanation. See you, Mac. It's Wednesday, guys. Look at how early you got your question in, buddy. I'm proud of you. Good day, Steve. I hope all is well, my friend. I'm sitting here finishing up your comment response video. Love these, by the way. I know you say they're low effort, and I get it's different effort, but I would not say low. And it occurs to me the title, Not Actually Trek Actually Comment Response, may be dated. When was the last time you titled a video Not Actually Trek Actually? I realize you're doing retro reviews and other Star Trek stuff, which maybe you'll choose to handwave as retroactively Not Actually Trek Actually, like the defendant in New York thinks he can handwave materials declassified. Which, it's your channel, but do you want to be like him, Steve? Do you? Whatever. I just thought it was funny. Have a great weekend. I love when things end with whatever. I just thought it was funny. That's usually a really good sign. Sometimes it's a bad sign, but in this case, I think it's a good sign. I am suitably chastened. and chagrined. Yeah, I have kind of backed off on the Not Actually Trek Actually branding, I guess you would call it, except for those comment response videos. It's kind of like, I can tie this into wrestling. Remember, in those of you who are fellow wrestling fans who remember the 90s, in the mid 90s, when the WWF first started going to a one pay-per-view a month model Instead of doing like maybe 5 pay-per-views a year, they started doing one every month. And they kept, their big shows like Royal Rumble and WrestleMania and SummerSlam and Survivor Series. But for months when they would do a pay-per-view where it wasn't like a big show with an established name, they started calling them In Your House. Right. And the first couple was like In Your House 1, In Your House 2, In Your House 3. And then they started giving them subtitles. It was In Your House, Beware of Dog or something like that. And then eventually the branding flipped and the nickname became the title, and In Your House was kind of like the subtitle. So it was like Buried Alive in Your House, like that kind of thing. And then eventually they just dropped the In Your House altogether. And the show was just called whatever it was called. So I guess I'm kind of doing that with Not Actually Trek Actually. Only not actually. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the question, CMAC. Jim Luck Pickirk. What Starfleet captain would you most like to serve under? I've always been a Picard man, but I feel like he might be a tad intimidating, at least at first. Pike seems pretty cool, especially if you could score an invite to one of his dinner parties. But my social anxiety would probably make that pretty intimidating too. No, I would go with Pike. I think I would love to serve under Pike. And even if I didn't get an invite to his dinner party, which I would be perfectly happy to not get, I'm not really a dinner party person. I would actually prefer to not get invited to the dinner party. Because if Captain Pike invites you to the dinner party, I mean, you kind of have to go. Like I'm sure he wouldn't be a dick about it, but the sort of assumption is, well, Captain Pike, the most awesome captain in the fleet, just invited you to his quarters for a dinner party. Of course, you're going to want to go, even if you don't really want to go. So I would rather just not get invited to the dinner party. I still think he'd be a really good captain to serve under, even if you're not in the dinner party crew, because he's just a really good captain. And he seems to genuinely care about his crew and about his ship. He just seems like a really good guy. So I would want to serve under him. Not that the other captains aren't good guys, right? But Pike seems especially to have a real emotional attachment to his crew. He seems to really care about the people under his command. And, I feel like that would be a good guy to serve under. So I would go with Pike. Debbie Bannister. Dana, how do you feel about some books removed from schools? Steve, I think you have a very nice singing voice. Well, Dana's not on the stream, but if Dana's in the chat, perhaps she would share her feelings about how she feels about having books removed from schools. I would guess Dana is not in favor of it. Just throwing a shot out there. If Dana wants to address it in the chat, that's up to her. But my guess would be that Dana is not in favor of having books removed from schools, nor am I. And thank you very much about saying I have a very nice singing voice. I'm not sure you're correct on that, but I appreciate the compliment. So thank you very much. Brian McKinley. Hi, Steve. I know that you have written fanfic stories in the DC universe and that you also write the scripts for your various videos. I happen to be a writer myself, having written 3 novels and a few short stories and articles. I'm currently trying to get back into the habit in order to finish my 4th. I found myself wondering if you've ever considered writing an original novel or even screenplay for publication and production. If not, is there any subject you could imagine yourself ever taking that leap for? Your videos are a highlight of my YouTube viewing, so keep up the good work. I've never written a novel, but I've written original stuff. I've written a lot of short stories that are original, not fanfic stuff. Nothing that's ever been published. And I've written a couple of screenplays. I mean, and this is going way back. This is going back into like early 20s when I was in my screenplay writing phase. But yeah, I wrote original stuff. It wasn't like I did write a screenplay for a Batman movie back in like 1997, 98 when the burn of Batman and Robin was still raw. And I thought, well, God, I could write a better movie than that. And then I tried to. So I did write a Batman screenplay, but most of my screenwriting experimentation, it was almost all original stuff. I wasn't writing primarily fanfic or even hardly fanfic at all at that point. So yeah, I've done a lot of original writing. Since I turned full-time to doing the YouTube channel as my job, like I haven't really had time to do a lot of original fiction writing. All of my writing is writing for the, for the YouTube channel. So other than the Stuffy videos, I'm not really doing creative writing. So, but yeah, I've never, I had an idea for a novel back in the day, but I never really did anything with it. And like I said, I've never had anything published aside from publishing it myself on the YouTube channel or on a blog or something. Um, Never had a screenplay produced. I did a rewrite of one of the scripts that we shot for the low budget independent film company Neon Reel that I worked with here in the Hagerstown area about 10 years ago. So I did write some of that stuff, and that was some of that was actually produced, and we had screenings at film festivals and whatnot, but nothing that was ever widely distributed. But yeah, so I've done original stuff before, but mostly the YouTube channel takes up all of the takes up all of my time nowadays. But I'm glad you enjoy it. That means a lot. Donkey Quixote. I watch a lot of progressive news programming, TYT, Midas Touch, ROF, etc., but no right-wing outlets. Am I wrong to not hear their side? Also, what news shows, if any, do you watch? I really don't think you're missing anything by not subjecting yourself to right-wing news outlets. I mean, there is, I suppose there is something to be said for wanting to know what the other side is saying and for wanting to keep informed, to sort of a know thine enemy sort of philosophy. But so much of that stuff is just disingenuous and propagandist and a grift that I don't really see much good in subjecting yourself to it. As for news shows, I mean, I will occasionally watch a little bit of CNN if I have time, and I get most of my news just from reading. I subscribe to the Washington Post, and I read that. I read news articles that I find on social media that seem like they're from reputable, outlets. I follow a couple of nonprofit uh, journalistic websites like ProPublica that does nonprofit like investigative journalism that is fantastic, and also there's a nonprofit newspaper, I guess news website in Baltimore now called the Baltimore Banner that is sort of rising in popularity as an alternative to the Sun, because the big newspaper in Baltimore for forever has been the Baltimore Sun, but it was just bought by a kind of far right guy, and people are very concerned about the future of the Baltimore Sun as a reputable news outlet now. So a lot of the focus on journalism in Baltimore has turned to other outlets, and primarily, foremost among those has been the Baltimore Banner, which is a nonprofit. So I've been paying some attention to that as well. So yeah, those are the kinds of sources that I usually get my news from. General Contact Unit Problem Child. I was thinking about your wheelchair vid again. Another thing I want to point out is I don't think I've ever read or watched a fantasy story where the characters use their magic for the stuff they should logically be able to. Like, I bet the assholes you were arguing with ever stopped to ask why the wizards in Harry Potter still buy food if magic can supposedly replicate it infinitely. Writers regularly just ignore inconvenient parts of their own world building. 2, do you think too many sci-fi space opera universes are too similar to Star Trek and Star Wars in terms of how space travel works? A while back, I started reading a sci-fi story where the only way to quickly get between solar systems is via giant wormhole generating gates. They have to be delivered to system at light speed, meaning a system can be isolated for a long time if yours is destroyed. I found it refreshing considering how many sci-fi settings just say ships have faster than light drives. 3, does Homeward count as a holodeck app? So number 1 and number 2, I can kind of answer in the same way, because I feel like unless the story is about those things or those things figure meaningfully into the story, it doesn't matter. Like, you can say, well, why don't they do this or that with magic in Harry Potter? Well, the Harry Potter stories aren't really about that. The Harry Potter stories aren't really about the, day-to-day details of what it's like to live in a world where people can use magic. The stories are about other things. So it doesn't bother me if I can think about it really hard and detect what seem like inconsistencies in that. Like, that doesn't bother me because that's not what the story's about. And the same thing with sci-fi and using faster than light travel to simplify things. Like, I get why they do it for plot expediency. And again, as long as the story is not really about that, Doesn't bother me at all. I will say I do appreciate it when it's obvious that a writer has gone to some trouble to try and do things a little differently. Like one of the things I really liked about The Expanse was that they tried to present space travel in a more realistic way. There's still a lot of science fiction and fantasy in there, but like especially with the propulsion of the ships and the way the ships travel and just the general scope of it, how the action, except for the stuff where they found like the alien, passageways to other parts of the galaxy and stuff like that's where the sort of sci-fi fantasy element comes into it. But in terms of the stuff that took place apart from that, like it's all confined to the solar system, and it's a fairly, it's not like Star Trek or Star Wars where it's like a galactic scale story. It's a relatively small scale story, in sci-fi terms. Like it's just focused on our solar system and people that live in various regions of it. So I appreciated that as a departure from like the Star Trek thing or the Star Wars thing where you can just travel to a completely different solar system and it's no big deal. It's just like going to the next town over or whatever. I do appreciate it when there is an effort made to make things different. And also that difference then, informs the story and the way the story is told. So I do appreciate it. But as long as the story is about other stuff, like like if the writers aren't worried about it, I'm not worried about it. And 3, does Homeward count as a holodeck episode? Yes, of course it does. Yes, I think Homeward is an excellent holodeck episode. Agent Meister, the only fresh thing on the menu. Oh. Peldor Joy, Steve, James Cameron's Titanic. What think you of it, sir? It's always been a film I've held close to my heart, and I'll never forget the hype around it when it first came out. But was it my imagination, or was the consensus for a while that it wasn't all that good? I remember nitpickers going on about how Jack could have easily gotten onto the door with Rose, or how the stars on the night of the sinking were in the wrong position. But was there more to it? The movie seems to have been rehabilitated in recent years, but did it deserve the slack? Did it deserve the slack in the first place? I assume you've seen Titanic, and if so, did you like it, and did your opinion of it ever change? Also, your recent TAS retro review reminded me of a Trek Actually episode you did a while back about the holodeck. When you turned around to reveal your Shives is a shit t-shirt, I laughed so hard it gave me a nosebleed. Pure genius, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you for that. Stay safe, big guy. Well, I'm glad I actually thought about that video too, because that's the, Kirk is a jerk. That's the joke I was making. I thought about that video when I was reviewing that episode too. So I'm glad you remember that video. Yeah, of course I've seen Titanic. And we actually reviewed it on the Late Seating podcast a couple years ago, Jason and I. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's fine. I think especially, I think it's a very, very well directed movie. I think James Cameron as the director does a fantastic job, especially in the section after the iceberg hit, when he is building suspense for the sinking and the characters are running around trying to find each other and trying to escape and encountering various obstacles. And I think at that point, you're seeing James Cameron as a great action adventure filmmaker, and he's just at the top of his form. I think a lot of that stuff is really, really well done. As a story, it's basically, a blown up melodrama. There's not a lot there. Special effects are really good. The performances are mostly really good. And it was that generation's big romantic epic. Like, I don't have anything against it. I'm not, upset that it was that popular and made that much money. It's that kind of movie. It's a big romantic epic that people go to see again and again, and they have warm feelings about it afterwards. And it was like a cinematic event for a lot of people who saw it. So I respect it for that, even though I have a lot of problems with it as a movie overall. And I kind of think that was always the consensus about it. There were always people, especially just in the general audience, who thought it was great. And its critical reputation has always been kind of mixed. I remember when it first came out, there were some reviews of it that said, yeah, this is great, go see it. And there were some other reviews of it that were like, yeah, I mean, it's all right. Good spectacle, not a whole lot underneath the spectacle. So I feel like its critical reputation has not really changed all that much over the years. There have always been people who thought it was the greatest thing ever. And there have always been people who kind of, respected parts of it, but didn't really think it was overall all that great. And just like with any movie, especially with any movie that is that successful, there have always been the contrarians who are like, everything about it is terrible and it sucks and it's an embarrassment and you're a loser if you like it at all. Like there have always been people like that for pretty much any, incredibly successful film. There's always people that will say that just, to be swimming against the tide. But no, I don't think, I feel like its critical reputation has been fairly consistent since it came out. But I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's the impression I've gotten. MW Ridger is sorry to actually you, but not that sorry. Hey Steve, loved your episode on The Big Goodbye, one of my favorite Trek episodes that combines two of my favorite things, Trek and noir. I will note, however, that you seemed to imply that Raymond Chandler wrote The Maltese Falcon when that was actually written by Dashiell Hammett. Obviously, the title of the episode is a reference to Chandler, though, The Big Sleep and The Long Goodbye, presumably. In general, I think I just love a good mashup of two genres. My own novel in progress is mostly a mashup of Arthurian legend and hard-boiled 1940s noir. What has been your favorite work of genre mashing in Star Trek or otherwise? Well, yes, I did. I should have at least put in a little, parenthetical that The Maltese Falcon was based on a novel by Dashiell Hammett, not Raymond Chandler, because I mentioned Raymond Chandler, but I didn't mention Dashiell Hammett, and I should have just for the sake of clarity, because I don't mean to imply that Raymond Chandler wrote The Maltese Falcon, because that was definitely Dashiell Hammett. As for genre mashing, let me see. I'm drawing a complete blank. I'm sorry. I know there are a ton of different examples I could cite, but I cannot think of a single one while I sit here trying to think of one like at will. I mean, Star Trek has done. Star Trek itself is a little bit of a genre mash because it's like it's a superficially a science fiction series, but it's structured like a Western. So there's that. And there are the episodes of Star Trek that are explicitly, Star Trek doing another genre. Like there are a couple of the Odo episodes of Deep Space Nine have kind of a private eye feel to them, are kind of neo-noir or sci-fi noir, I guess. And, there are the Western episodes where it's like literally like Worf in a holodeck program of a Western, or, Captain Archer's Enterprise visits a planet with a Western town, or, the gunfight at the OK Corral episode of the original Star Trek that I did a retro review of last year, where they they're taken to a town that is a recreation of Tombstone. So, there have been examples of that. Some of those have been good and some of those have been less than good, but they're usually fun. So I can think of those examples, but I mean, I'm sure there's a great example that I'm just not being able to think of at the moment of a great, genre mashup, but I can't think of it. I'm drawing a complete blank, a complete blank. So I apologize. But thank you for the correction or the reminder to issue a clarification, let's say, on the Chandler and Hammett thing. You woo, an adorable little communist, you woo, some random geek. Content warning, ableism. If I'm so disabled I can't work, there would be no point in life for me. A viewer said this to me on my stream once. I was a bit shocked at that statement. I told this viewer how ableist that statement is. Disabled folks hate when able-bodied folks say that. He clarified, I am saying my life is not worth living because work is all I know. And yet, he has a family, children and grandchildren that he loves, but he hates to be a burden to others. It's not about the work, it's about being self-reliable. And yet MLK Jr. said, before you finish eating breakfast, you've depended on more than half the world. Now, this viewer also hates when folks are able-bodied folks in his view, but choose not to work. They are a drain on society or their partner that pays the bills. Why do folks feel that their life has no value or is not worth living if they can't work? Side note, here is something silly. So before I answer the question, let me show you the silly thing. And this is a thing on Twitter that Geek shared with me. And it's this. And Geek, I just want to show you, I just want to let you know, this is proof that even though we disagree on politics sometimes, I consider you a friend and I like you very much, because if I didn't, there's no way in hell I would be putting this Lord of the Rings shit on my live stream. So yes, this is a Lord of the Rings meme that is, it is a, speaking of crossing, of smashing up genres, this is a an airplane Lord of the Rings mashup. That is Leslie Nielsen as the Doctor from Airplane doing his but that's not important right now shtick for the One Ring. So there you go. That's proof. That's proof that that Geek and I really are friends, despite our occasional differences. Because God, I have no love in my heart whatsoever for J.R.R. Tolkien or anything he ever wrote. But there you go. Why do folks feel that their life has no value if they can't work? Because our society has been telling them that for decades. And it doesn't, I mean, it's not an excuse. Like, I would still love for more people to take a different view and to realize that there can be meaning to life beyond your ability to work productively. Like, that whole concept is so completely toxified. Like, yes, okay, I understand there's value in work, there's dignity in work. You can derive meaning in your life from work, even if it is like just your job and it's not even something that you would have chosen or that you genuinely love. It's just the job you do to provide a living for your family. Like, you can derive meaning from that and a feeling of self-worth from that, and that's completely fine. But it's not the only valid form of value and self-worth. Like, you don't need and you shouldn't have to tie your whole concept of your value to yourself or to your family or to your community or whatever to whether or not you are working and earning a certain amount of money. Like, that's completely cockeyed. But that's because, like, we have elevated, not just us. I mean, our generation has carried it on and has largely accepted it, or at least decided that we just kind of have to put up with it. But it's been going on since, anybody can remember, that the elevation of the profit motive above everything else, where your number one duty, your number one responsibility as a citizen of the world is to perform profitable labor. And not profitable for you primarily, but profitable for somebody else. Hopefully it will be profitable for you, at least to an extent, but that's not ultimately the point. The point is that your labor should be profitable to somebody else, to someone above you, to somebody who, in almost all cases, already has way more than you have. Because they've profited from the labor of a bunch of other people in addition to you, right? That is your number one responsibility as a citizen. And I just think that's horseshit. And you know me, I'm not an anarchist. I'm not a communist. But I am someone who believes that we should not be forced to trade our labor for the basic necessities of life, and we should not be forced into a system where you are taught that you only have value if you do trade your labor for the necessities of life, and that your labor generates profit for other people, not just for you. And in fact, mostly not for you. I have a big problem with that. But the reason why people accept it is because we've been conditioned that is just the way it is. And that's the way it should be for generation after generation after generation. And it sucks. The Thinking Cat, have you ever considered disaster in where you live? As for many years, there's been theories that the Yellowstone supervolcano, if it goes off, most of North America could go into a mini ice age, and states are extremely ill prepared. Have you created something like storage of medicine or noodles and camping equipment? As being in England, I fortunately have no environmental threats, but I always store canned food, water, and toilet rolls just in case there's something like COVID again. Do you think preparing for disaster is a waste of time or something we should all do? I think a certain amount of preparation is reasonable. I think, people go overboard with it, and people who go full on survivalist, like they're expecting the entire system to collapse any day now, and they've got their fucking bunker with their 10 years worth of rations. And, you know, I think that's a little over the top, but I don't think there's anything wrong with, having some provisions stored just in case, like you say, even if it's just something like COVID, where it's not a society destroying disaster, but it might be a situation that comes up unexpectedly where you can't get to the grocery store for, let's say, a few weeks. Maybe it's a pandemic or like an environmental disaster or a terrorist attack or whatever, where it just going out to the store to get some food or running to McDonald's to get dinner or whatever is not going to be an option, at least for a while. And you want to have some stuff laid up, for a rainy day. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As for, have I created something? Do I have a plan for if that happens? My plan is to come to England and crash with you. I hope that's okay. So, maybe get a few more cans of food just in case. Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve, there's a credible rumor going around, wink, that Jonathan Rhys Meyers will have a recurring role on Star Trek Legacy playing the son of the Traveler. I heartily approve. The superfans demanding Star Trek Legacy deserve nothing less than an exhaustive exploration of their favorite magical, mystical master of space and time. Where did he come from? What's with the obfuscation and mumbo-jumbo? Was his interest in Wesley Crusher purely professional, or did he view him as a sort of surrogate son to replace his real son, who was either incapable of or uninterested in traveling, and who instead enlisted in Starfleet to become a xeno-ophthalmologist? Anyhow, what's your favorite Jonathan Rhys Meyers movie? Mine is Velvet Goldmine. Fight me on this. Hashtag I gots the mod. You know what sucks is I actually looked up Jonathan Rhys Meyers' filmography a few hours ago so I could have an answer ready for this, and I completely forgot what movie I decided to pick. So I'm going to say my favorite Jonathan Rhys Meyers movie is also Velvet Goldmine. Jonathan Rhys Meyers, buddies. Me and you, man. Yeah. Velvet Goldmine, which I don't think I've even actually seen. But Velvet Goldmine, Jonathan Rhys Meyers. Yes, absolutely. I like this bit, by the way, Stephen. I like this bit. Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, you are a NASA flight director whose job it is to select astronauts for an upcoming space shuttle mission. The shuttle is Atlantis. Question, who from any of the Star Trek characters from the entire franchise would you select for the role of commander, pilot, payload, and mission specialist? For me, the commander of the mission is Erica Ortegas because she's such a badass helmswoman. But who else would you pick? Each character's skills and expertise will be taken into account for this selection. And before I give my answer, Isaiah has also furnished us with a photograph. And I could see it this time, buddy. I could actually access the photo, so I'll show it to everybody. This is part of Isaiah's awesome Guy Bluford cosplay. Guy Bluford was the first African-American astronaut. He was a member of the crew of the space shuttle. I think the first flight he was on was in 1983, I think. But yes, he was America's first black astronaut, and this is Isaiah's cosplay that he's been working on for quite a while, and it looks amazing, my friend. I can't tell you how envious 10-year-old Steve would have been of that, because when the space shuttle program was in full swing, and that was like, those astronauts were my heroes, and I loved those blue flight suits. I would have killed for a costume like that. So good job on the Guy Bluford cosplay. What Star Trek characters would I pick to fill out a shuttle crew? Commander Riker would be the commander, because in addition to being a commander in Star Trek, he's also a hell of a pilot. Pilot would be Geordi, because Geordi's also, a pretty good pilot, right? Payload and mission specialist, let's say payload specialist would be Scotty. Mission specialist would be, let's throw one of the other shows a bone. Mission specialist would be Harry Kim. Fuck it. Get a Voyager guy in there. Throw Harry a bone. He's been through enough. Kier the Unclear. What if Star Trek was as woke as it was claimed to be by the worst people on the internet? Trans-Ferengi captain who doesn't wear clothes. First officer and second officer getting to third base on every planet or ship they visit. Ace pilot who is ace. I don't really understand what they're trying to say, so I hope by bringing out the more absurd arguments, it'll become more decipherable. Well, yeah, I mean, I think you've got it. I think you've deciphered it. When people complain that Star Trek or anything is woke, what they're really saying is not enough white people, not enough men, not enough cis hetero people. That's what they're saying. Or the inverse of that. Too many queer people, too many people of color, that kind of thing. That's what they mean by woke. So yeah, if there was a trans Ferengi captain who was also a nudist, I guess. Oh, too woke. Too woke. That's different. That's different. That's different than I am. Ace pilot who is ace. No, that's not, can't have that. You've got it. You can't be ace. You can't be. You have to be, preferably you have to be hetero, or you can also be homosexual, but you have to be completely celibate. Those are the options. And the second one is highly undesirable, but tolerable. If you have a gay character who is completely celibate and now, not ace though. They have to be gay, but just celibate, not asexual, just gay and celibate. That's the option. Or hetero and, and if you're a man, hetero and just getting laid all the time with women, or if you're a woman, hetero and also celibate. Those are the options. If you want to have and it goes without saying, everybody's white. Those are your options for a non-woke starter. I feel like you've got it pretty much figured out. Rachel, this isn't a question, just a note, as I just signed up on Patreon. I started watching your An Atheist Reads videos in 2018, and I believe I watched/listened to every review in the series at least twice, some of them 3 times. I never really tuned into anything else, but stayed subscribed, then recently got curious about your Star Trek videos and have been bouncing around the backlog. And I also checked out Ensign's log. At this point, I've gotten to have your stellar work for free, and I'm way overdue for becoming a patron. Thanks for putting all of this work out there. Well, thank you very much, Rachel. That's very nice of you to say. I'm glad my various videos have been of use to you and you have enjoyed them. And thank you so much for becoming a patron. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you sticking with me all these years and deciding to become a supporter. That's really great. I really appreciate it. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard as a supporter, because you've been aboard as an audience member for a while now. Kara Hughes. Hi, Steve. Let us all agree that Code of Honor is possibly the worst episode of TNG, although I think Angel 1 is also dire. However, would you consider rewriting Code of Honor with lizard/reptilian aliens, or would you just scrap the whole episode and consign it to the flames of hell? I have considered rewriting this episode, but only got as far as replacing the Ligonians with lizards, but after that, I'm stuck. Catch you later, Kara. First of all, I agree. Angel 1 is also terrible. I think I mentioned in my review of The Big Goodbye yesterday, as we're doing this, that, I mean, season 1 of TNG just in general is awful. Like, there are a few decent episodes in there here and there, but for the most part, it's just wretched. And yeah, Angel 1 is terrible too. Changing the aliens in Code of Honor to lizard people, or really just ditching the all black casting of them, and then also ditching the Arabian Nights costume design, I think that those 2 changes alone would be enough to lift it out of worst episode ever territory, because that would avoid most of like the really like racial and culturally offensive parts of it. But you'd still have a lousy story. I mean, even without, like, to me, the racism and, that element of it is what puts it over the top as, worst episode ever. Like, that's what puts it in a class by itself. But if you get rid of that, it's still a lousy episode. So if I were going to try to rewrite it, I mean, I think it should be a Tasha episode. I think Tasha's the one who gets abducted. Tasha's the one who has to have the fight. In the episode as it exists, even though Tasha is doing all the important stuff, Tasha's actually hardly in the episode. She's not the main character of the episode. So I would rewrite it to make it a Tasha episode. So when Tasha gets kidnapped by the Ligonians, I would follow them down to the planet. I would have scenes of Tasha on the planet with the Ligonians and let us see what she's going through down there instead of staying with the Enterprise the whole time. Just flip that. Maybe check in once or twice with the Enterprise to let us know what's going on there and to keep that, moving forward, but spend most of the time with Tasha down on the planet. Let us see what she's going through and, make the story hinge on her choices. She's the one who makes the important decisions. She's the one who makes the meaningful choices that steer the story in whatever direction it goes. Make it a Tasha episode. And I don't have specifics beyond that. But maybe try to write it so that she has a moment of decision whether or not and also change Yarina's name, Tasha Yar, and she's fighting, and her rival is a woman named Yarina. We can fix that. There's got to be something else you can name Yarina, anything, but try to make the fight happen so that Tasha has a moment of truth where she has to choose between letting Yarina, or whatever we decide to call her, live or die. And the choice is, if Tasha kills her and wins the fight, they might not get the vaccine. So it's, or no, if Tasha kills her, they get the vaccine. But if Tasha lets her live, they don't get the vaccine. Because it's like about impressing the Ligonians or something. I'm not sure. I'm coming up with all of this in the moment. I don't know. But that's the choice she has to make. Like, take one life to save millions with the vaccine, or spare one life and jeopardize the millions who need the vaccine. Like, that's the choice that Tasha should be faced with. And I assume that we would, because it's Star Trek, and especially because it's early TNG, we would find some way for her to find a third option, to save everybody. But I'm not sure what that would be at this point. But just make it a Tasha episode and make it about what she needs to do and what choices she needs to make. That, I think, would help. And if you decide to take another whack at it, maybe that would be maybe that's enough to kind of shake something loose for you. Maybe. I don't know. Wolfie Basach, hey Steve, here's a story about me and my new kitten best buddy. Unfortunately, there's a backstory of previous mistreatment, and it makes you wonder how so much cruelty can be set upon such a beautiful and charming creature. But that's enough about me. The cat, on the other hand, couldn't be any happier, apart from last month. It was that time of day when a chap leaves a certain room a few pounds lighter than when he entered, and just as I'd sat down, the kitten ran out from where she'd been hiding and meowed at me, wanting to be let out. You just wait 10 seconds, I thought, then you'll really know what wanting to be let out is like. Anyway, as pretty a picture as I'm painting, I can happily reveal that the incident passed without either of us needing resuscitation, although it took a few hours for the cat's eyes to uncross themselves. And so my question is, what's the most socially awkward situation that you've ever had? If you insist, you can include humans. I will choose a situation that did not directly involve me, although I was a bystander to it, and it was excruciating. Many, many years ago, my best friend at the time attended a cookout at my family's house with his girlfriend at the time, and he chose to break up with his girlfriend at the cookout where she did not have another ride home. So he broke up with his girlfriend, and then she had to just kind of hang out with us until it was time to go. It was awful. It was embarrassing. It was in very, very poor taste on his part and very cruel on his part to do that. Like in the middle, instead of waiting, just wait till after the cookout, dude. If you're going to break up with her, wait till everybody's home and then do it in private. Don't do it. It was absolutely fucking terrible. Did not, like, this person and I are no longer friends. We haven't spoken to each other for many, many years. It was not our estrangement was not due to that, but that was a contributing factor, I suppose, to revealing to me what kind of person he was, and that perhaps he was not the kind of person that I wanted to have in my life for too much longer. So, yeah, that was awful. That was awful. Matthew Gretzinger. Hi, Steve. I mentioned this the last time I asked an Ask Away question. I'm a big fan of your best Superman and Batman ever video essays. Recently in a video, you mentioned that you'd written some Batman fanfic. That made me wonder, regarding Superman, what kind of story you'd write if you had the chance to write a Superman story for DC. What would it be like? Which villain or villains would you include? Is there any specific Superman writer whose style you'd emulate? Or do you have an idea already that you would use? Thanks for all of your great video essays and for taking the time to answer my question. Well, thank you for taking the time to ask, and for being a supporter. It's tough to predict because, like, I have written a few Superman fanfics over the years. In fact, I wrote one a few years ago. One of the last fanfics that I wrote was about 3 years ago. I wrote a Superman short story that I think I read on a live stream, actually. It was, I can't remember the title of it, but it was about Dick Grayson drops in on Superman while he's on the outs with Batman. It's sort of set during the period when he's kind of outgrown being Robin, but he hasn't become Nightwing yet. And he's just had a fight with Batman. So he's kind of, just going to hang out with Superman for a while. And so it's Dick Grayson and Superman having this little adventure together. And it's very comedic, and it's very Silver Age. It involves a shrinking ray. Superman gets shrunk down to tiny little size by a shrink ray. And it's just a really goofy, fun, like Silver Age story with some character stuff in it. And so I might write something like that. And like, I didn't plan it to be that when I started writing it. My concept, I didn't plot it out ahead of time. My concept when I started writing it was, I want to do a story about Superman and Robin, or Superman and Dick Grayson. And it just kind of became what it became. And I kind of made it up as I went along and sort of discovered it as I wrote it. And it just came out as this fun, goofy, sort of throwback 1950s and 60s story. Right. And I thought I was really pleased with it. I thought it turned out really well. Would all of my Superman stories be like that? Probably not. But, I enjoy that period of especially DC comics. Like, I enjoy the goofy Silver Age stuff. And I enjoy more modern stuff like what Grant Morrison has done, with Superman, in the last 15, 20 years or so, where those stories have been very evocative of the Silver Age. I've been kind of taking Silver Age tropes and Silver Age tones and sort of updating them and reinterpreting them for a more modern audience. I really, really like that kind of stuff. So, I mean, maybe it would be something like that, but I don't know. That's why I've thought for many, many years, if I got my wish, if the genie came out of the bottle one day and said, hey, I'm going to grant your wish, you get to be a writer for DC Comics and you can write Superman or Batman, my dream job would be to do like a Legends of the Dark Knight title, or Legends of Superman, Legends of the Man of Steel, where I could just tell whatever stories I wanted and they would not be tied to whatever the present continuity was. They would be standalone stories and readers could take them as being canon or not canon. It wouldn't make a damn bit of difference to me. I could just do my own stories set, in some nebulous, period of the character's history. Wouldn't matter, because the focus would be on the story that I was telling. And that would be my dream job, to just be able to write my own Superman stories and not have to worry about canon and not have to worry about continuity, and not have to worry about tying it into the next big crossover or whatever, to just be able to do my own thing in my own book. And it's just off in its own little, off on its own little cloud somewhere. And whether it was Superman or Batman or some other character that I could come up with an interesting take for, that's what I would love to do. But of course, you don't really get jobs like that. It's not like DC Comics would come down and say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, just do that. Yeah, here, we'll give you a Batman or a Superman title and go ahead and just do whatever the fuck you want. Like, that's not usually the way it works. But again, if the genie came out of the bottle, that's the job I would want. Air One Fire, who has a gun taped to his back at all times, just in case. Steve, I'm going to make a fuck ton of money next month. An ass butt ton of money. A lot of it is thanks to you, so thank you. My question is about understanding literary works. I recently got very interested in reading more books and movies, and when I listen to Late Seating or your Star Trek analysis or anything else of that kind, it all makes sense to me, and then I pretend to my friends that I came up with it on my own with absolutely no shame. But when I read or watch something on my own, then things like themes, foreshadowing, symbolism, and I don't even know what else usually go over my head. I'm not terribly bad at it, but I'm not good at it either. So the question is, how do I get good at all that literary stuff? I'll take anything you can give me. And Dana, if you're there in the chat, I'm interested in your thoughts as well. I'll watch this live. Best wishes. And I'm glad you're able to join us live, by the way. Thank you for being here. And it's cool to see you in the chat. And you're welcome for making all the money. I'm glad I could help in whatever small way I did. But I think you're on the right track as it is. I don't know what Dana will have to say about it. But for my part, the most important thing is to just watch more movies or read more books or whatever form of art you are looking to become more literate in and get better at critiquing and analyzing. Just do more of it. Watch more movies, read more books, and practice watching it critically or reading it critically and finding, seeing the strings that you're not supposed to normally see, or finding the deeper themes that maybe aren't spelled out exactly for you, that are subtext rather than text, that kind of things. Also, read other people's work, read other people's analysis and criticism. There's a massive library going back decades and decades of fantastic film analysis and criticism, not just movie reviews. I mean, reading movie reviews is a good idea too, like just reading regular movie reviews that come out when a movie opens in theaters. But also reading deeper analysis. Like there are so many great film essayists and so many great books written about film or written about particular directors or interviews with particular directors where they talk about their work and they talk about these kinds of things. They talk about the language of cinema, and it can help you to learn that language, or to learn the language of literary analysis if you're interested more in doing that with prose. It's the same kind of thing. A good start for film, at least, is there was. It's a book and it's also a documentary series called The Story of Film. And I have not read the book, but I have seen the documentary series. It used to be streaming. I don't know if it's still streaming anywhere, but I know it's available on DVD and Blu-ray because I have it on Blu-ray. And it's just called The Story of Film. And it's like a 10-part series or something like that. And it examines the history of movies, and not just Western cinema, but it talks about the cinema of Asia and Africa and South America and just international cinema from all over the world, from all different eras, Russian cinema, German cinema, and as well as American cinema and that kind of thing. And it goes through the history of it. It doesn't just hit the major films that everybody knows. It talks about lesser known works that maybe you wouldn't have heard of if you weren't a massive film nerd. And it talks about a bunch of movies in there that I'd never heard of. And it's fascinating. And it is very much in that vein of not just, oh, here's a movie from, 1966 that was really good and really influential, but it talks about why. And it talks about why this film is influential, what this movie does, what this director does, what these actors do, why a shot is composed in a particular way, how a film is able to communicate a particular feeling, what this movie has in common with other movies from different parts of cinema history. Like, it's a really, really great primer on the kind of thing that you're talking about. So if you can get your hands on a copy of The Story of Film, I would highly recommend watching that. And if that wets your whistle and you want more, then you can go from there. But that's a really, really great place to start. John Burns, I'm cosplaying at the Calgary Expo as Uncle Buck. Long live John Candy. Yesterday, I got an autograph of John Rhys Davies. He mentioned liking my hat. I showed him a photo of John Candy and Uncle Buck and thanked him for the series I, Claudius. He mentioned, I believe that's the first time I killed Patrick Stewart. I responded with, what's a killing between friends? Here's hoping the money for the Ukraine can help end that dumb war. I know war shouldn't make sense, but here's hoping. I also hope one day Zelensky can have a peaceful life after the war. I'm so glad Obama is enjoying his life out of the spotlight. I hope your weekend goes well. Thank goodness it was overcast while I was walking in the cosplay parade. That was a lot of fun today. Well, I'm really glad you had a good time at the con, and I'm really glad that you had a good time in your Uncle Buck cosplay, and that you got to meet John Rhys Davies. That's awesome. He's an old favorite of mine too. And as for the rest of it, you know what? I share your thoughts. This is one of those times where we're in complete agreement. I'm glad that we finally passed additional funding for Ukraine here in the United States. It fucking took us long enough. Better late than never, and hopefully not too late. I was very happy to see that that finally passed and that we will be sending additional funding and additional armaments to Ukraine, and hopefully it helps. And yes, hopefully that war does end soon and it ends with a favorable outcome. And I'm glad Obama's enjoying his life out of the spotlight for the most part too. So we're all on the same page, John. So thank you very much, and I'm glad you had a good time at the expo. Matt L. So what do you think about Discovery Season 5 so far? I really liked the last episode that focused on the antagonists. Also, a certain ship cameo was fun. Overall, I'd give it an 8 out of 10 myself so far for the season. I assume a season wrap-up or possibly series wrap-up from you when it's all over? P.S. I'm so glad a certain trial is going on. I just hope the jury isn't intimidated into an acquittal if they otherwise would convict. Well, we are definitely in agreement on that last bit for sure. As for Discovery, I think 8 out of 10 is a little high for me, but I'm enjoying it so far. I thought the most recent episode was good. I would say I appreciate the effort at sort of shading in the villains. You know, one of the weaknesses of Discovery since really all along, but especially since it jumped to its current setting, is I have not been overly impressed with the villains. They keep trying to have these big, these Buffy the Vampire Slayer style big bads for the season, and I haven't been all that impressed with the villains have seemed it's not that they're necessarily even bad characters, but just like Osira wasn't a bad character, but I felt like the threat she presented just did not seem credible. It's like, really? This is like the big enemy of the Federation? Like, even in the Federation's shrunken and diminished state at this era of the show, it seems like this woman and her little, her gang of gangsters, like this, is this really that big of a deal? Is this really that serious of a threat? So I like that they're turning the villains in this season into kind of not really villains. Like they're giving them personal motivations for doing what they're doing. And it's not so much that they're a threat to the crew of Discovery. It's more like they're rivals, and they're trying to get the same thing that the Disco crew is trying to get. So I think that works a little better. I don't think the backstory we got for them in the most recent episode was outstanding. But like I said, I appreciate the effort. Like, I'm glad that they're at least trying something with these characters. And I hope that it eventually goes somewhere interesting. But I mean, as usual with Discovery, like, it looks great. The acting is terrific. And I'm pulled along by the characters. I care about enough of the characters, and I'm interested enough in enough of the characters that I am, willing and eager to come back for more. So, I mean, I don't like giving things ratings. Maybe 6 out of 10 so far, which would be 3 out of 5. Like 3 out of 5 sounds better than 6 out of 10. So I'll say 3 out of 5 so far. Like not hasn't like blown me away. Like, oh my God, this is incredible, but it hasn't been bad. And I'm sticking with it. It still got me. So, and yes, when it's over, I will do a season wrap up, and I would like to do both a season wrap up for season 5. And then also at some point after that, a complete, look back at the entire series. I would like that. I would like to do both of those because I feel like I owe that to Disco. Disco has been, it's had its ups and downs for sure, but I have mostly been a fan of it and mostly appreciated it. And I would like to show it some appreciation when all is said and done. So there is definitely going to be a season 5 video looking at the entire season when it's done. And there will also almost certainly be a video about the entire series once it's over. Sent Merck, hey Steve, your recent video about booking your best WrestleMania card included you saying you had to get an Undertaker match in there, no doubt as a nod to his streak, but it had me wondering what your take on the Taker is in general. I sense you're not a fan of spooky bullshit in your wrestling and prefer it presented as a serious fake sport, but Taker seems to be the exception to that rule for many. For my part, I had a tape of the 1990 Survivor Series when he debuted, and I ran it ragged. He blew my 6-year-old mind. And since then, he's been my favorite wrestler, even if he's nowhere near the best. Learning about the actual person has dimmed that a bit of late, but he'll always be my favorite on some level. Do you take to the Taker? Is his particular BS perhaps grandfathered in since you also encountered him at a young age? Kind of, but not really. I have my limits with The Undertaker. You're correct that I generally don't go in for the spooky stuff, or not just the spooky stuff. Anytime that wrestling gets too corny and too to the point where it's like, okay, that, like that's gone beyond my ability to suspend my disbelief, right? Like wrestling is always going to be outrageous and exaggerated, and it's never going to be, strictly speaking, realistic. But there's a line where, like with The Undertaker, when he was just a big spooky guy, who sat up like he was sitting up in a coffin and no sold most of the moves and walked really slow and was, just sort of classic old school Undertaker. I was fine with that. He was never my favorite, but I thought he was cool. I was good with that. When he morphed in the Attitude Era into like a satanic priest, and then he was like legitimately supposed to, he had power over lightning, like he was striking people with lightning, and we were supposed to believe that this was really happening, that this guy somehow had actual powers over the forces of nature and he could cause lightning to hit people. That's when I was like, okay, this is horseshit. Like, I'm here to watch Steve Austin, okay? I'm not here to see this fucking goofball try to convince me that he's striking people with lightning and like starting fires with a wave of his hand. Like, this is fucking horseshit. So that he lost me with that. That's too far. But then he got me back. Now, I wasn't a big fan of Biker Taker. Like, I didn't think that was good either. I mean, it's more realistic, but I didn't capture my imagination. But when he came back in around WrestleMania 20, and he was back in the Dead Man gimmick, and he was more like an updated version of what he had been to start with. He wasn't doing the spooky shit anymore. I mean, he was being the Undertaker. He was spooky in terms of his demeanor and stuff, but he wasn't doing like magic powers. He wasn't doing teleportation or ascensions to the ceiling. He wasn't having lightning hit people. He was just a big, tough guy with a spooky gimmick, right? Then I got back into him again. And also this amazing thing happened where he at that point, he started having like really good matches. Like up until that point, Undertaker had, whether you liked the gimmick or not was a matter of personal taste. But most people, I think, agreed, like the matches were never really the big thing. Undertaker had some decent matches here and there. Some of his matches with Mankind were all right, but he was never like a guy that you expected to have a great match. But then all of a sudden, starting in like 2004, 2005, he kind of became that guy. Like he started having really good matches with lots of people, with Kurt Angle, with Edge, with Batista, with Cena, with he and Cena didn't really cross paths all that much now that I think about it. But and of course with Shawn Michaels. I mean, his matches with Shawn both of his WrestleMania matches with Shawn were amazing. So yeah, I mean, Taker was never my favorite. And I share your disappointment and sort of holding him at arm's length as a person, because as a human being, his, attitude and politics are pretty disgusting to me. But just purely as a wrestler, he was never my favorite. But there have been periods in his career where once he wasn't doing like the really goofball, corny, spooky shit, and he actually turned into a pretty reliably good wrestler, where I liked him quite a lot. Never my favorite, but I liked him quite a lot for a pretty good chunk of his career. Last question. This one's from Russell. Got it in just under the wire. Hey, Steve. Sorry, very under the wire. I am at work. I just had a second to do this. Anyways, I wanted to say nice review on your Big Goodbye review. I was pleased to hear that you think it's an overall good episode of TNG and not just a good first season episode. It got me to wonder, though, what is your favorite holodeck episode? It can be from any series, and why? Also, do you consider that Odo episode where his mind is linked with Cisco and Garrick and Dax similar to a holodeck episode, or its own different thing? Anyways, got to go back to work. I will hear your answer tomorrow. P.S. Hangout Sunday. Yes, we are having our monthly hangout on Sunday. I'll talk more about that at the end of the show, but yes, we are having our hangout on Sunday. I think that episode of Deep Space Nine you describe is similar in concept to a holodeck episode, but I do not count it as a holodeck episode because it doesn't take place on a holodeck. Like I feel like there are enough like literal holodeck episodes that we don't need to be pulling episodes with similar concepts but that aren't holodeck episodes into the category. Like the category is crowded enough as it is. But yes, it is similar in concept. I would agree with that. And it's a very good episode. I like that episode a lot. My favorite holodeck episode, it's also a Deep Space Nine episode. I think probably my favorite holodeck episode is Our Man Bashir. To me, that is the perfect holodeck show because it features a lot of the standard tropes of a holodeck episode, but it has fun with them. It subverts them. It does other things that holodeck episodes sometimes do, but sometimes don't do. Like it gives most of the rest of the cast a chance to play outside their regular character and to ham it up. You know, I mean, Avery Brooks is so great as Dr. Noah in the holodeck fantasy of and the whole thing is great. And there's a nice little story there between Bashir and Garrick that gets its own little payoff. And it's a really really good episode. So there have been a few solid holodeck shows throughout the history of the franchise, and I'm not gonna review every single one of them in the current batch I'm doing in the retro reviews. I'm gonna do some this year, and then I'm coming back and doing some more next year with another batch that I have planned out. I think Our Man Bashir is going to be in this first batch, though. I'll have to check my document that I have everything planned out in, but I think Our Man Bashir is coming up in the batch that I'm in right now. So in a few more weeks, I'll get to it. But yeah, I think Our Man Bashir is my favorite holodeck show of everything. All right, that's it for the patron and member questions. But before we move on, before I turn my full attention to the live chat, of course, we do have a little bit of business to take care of, and that is, of course, it is time to debut a brand new Stuffy short. And actually, I think I'm going to be shooting Stuffy shorts this weekend because this is the last one that I currently have in the can. So between now and 2 weeks from now, and I do another one of these live streams, I'm gonna have to make some more. I have a bunch more written. I just need to actually shoot them. So anyway, here we go. Please enjoy this brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Hey,
Hi,
what are you watching?
Past Lives.
Is it any good?
So far, I think you'd like it.
Catch me up. What have I missed?
Not much yet, it just started. The first scene is of people talking at a bar. Then it cuts to a flashback of two of the people when they were children in South Korea 24 years before.
That's what this is now, the flashback?
Yep.
24 years ago, so it's like, what, the late 70s?
No, this is a new movie.
Right.
So 24 years ago would be the year 2000.
You like that? I like that. I know it's bad form to praise your own work, but I like that one. And by the way, Past Lives, the movie that Stuffy's watching in that, fantastic movie. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to watch a really, really, really fucking good movie. Past Lives. Could not possibly recommend it more. Yes, it's a real movie, Black Cover 95. It's a fantastic movie. All right, let's turn now to the live chat. Hello, everybody. Thanks for sticking with me. Oh, and I saw Michael, you drop. First of all, Philip with the super chat says, I'm watching Monk right now, and the show has twice done something that doesn't sit right with me. Monk is making progress with his issues, but by the end of the story, he's set back again, to be continued. Same thing used to happen with House. Did you ever watch the show House? Same thing. They because the show was on for so long and because they wanted to give House some character development, but also didn't want to change his character in any kind of fundamental way, he kind of went in circles. He would get better, and then he would go back to having the same problems he had always had. Then he would get better again. And then, House had the same problem. Let me see what else I have missed in the super chats. No, that's it. Good. Oh, and there was a super chat earlier before we even started by Peter version 1. A couple of super chats from Peter version 1 who said, started watching your videos recently, very entertaining and time consuming. My question is non-Star Trek, though. Did you ever watch The Orville, and will you do videos about that show as well? Followed up by another super chat where Peter version 1 says, just saw you made a video. So, yes, thank you for the super chats to you, Peter. And yes, I have done a video about The Orville. I enjoyed The Orville, especially seasons 2 and 3. Okay, now let me see. Michael Handeline said some genre mashup examples: Cowboy Bebop, Blade Runner, Buffy, Firefly, Serenity, Jessica Jones, Constantine, The Dresden Files, Lucifer, The Big Lebowski, Star Wars. All of those that I have seen, I like a lot. Well, I wouldn't say I like Firefly a lot, but I liked it. It was all right. I enjoyed it. But yeah, Cowboy Bebop, I love. Blade Runner, great film. Buffy and Angel, two of my favorite shows. Jessica Jones, great show. I've seen a couple of different versions of Constantine. I'm not sure which one you're speaking about specifically, but yeah, I'll go with Constantine. I haven't ever seen the Dresden Files. I haven't seen Lucifer, but yeah, Big Lebowski, Star Wars, obviously great. So yeah, I'll go along with all of those that I have personally watched. Oh, Azalea, we're only a year apart, so I feel you. Yeah, it's weird. It's like it's part of the aging process, I know, but like it still feels like, 20 years ago was the 80s. And it's not. 20 years ago was the 2000s. And it's just I still can't get my head around that because I am old, you see. Oh, Black Cover 95. Uwu is pronounced uwu, not uwo. I couldn't give less of a shit. But thank you for the correction. John Collins says 4 questions. 1, I'm a Dem. However, really, is President Biden the best Dem for Prez? 2, where do members post their questions early? 3, have you ever watched Dark Side of the Ring? 4, Star Trek has been more socially conscious. Okay. President Biden is not the best Dem for president, but he is going to be the nominee. So he's the one we have to vote for. I mean, it's really as simple as that. Where do members post their questions early? I post a link as a patrons only post for the patrons and a members only post on my YouTube community page for the members that has a link to a Google form that you submit your early question to. I usually post them at noon Eastern time on the Monday before an Ask Away. 3, have you ever watched Dark Side of the Ring? Yes, I've seen every episode. I am a big fan of Dark Side of the Ring. And 4, Star Trek has been more socially conscious. I agree in a way. It has been more didactically socially conscious. Like I feel like it has, in the past, its politics were a little more in your face in terms of this is an allegory for something. The newer shows aren't quite that out front with it, but I still think they are. I mean, it's still Star Trek. It's still very socially conscious. Unum secundum velit says, what are your thoughts on the idea that not explaining a thing acts as a validation of it being normal and accepted enough to not bat an eye in setting, inspired by the wheelchairs and Star Trek video? I think that, yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons why I think disability representation should be handled that way, unless there is a specific reason in the story to make a big deal out of it. Like just have disabled people in the story. Just have people using wheelchairs, and don't worry about explaining it. Just they're there. They're part of society. They're accepted. There you go. Yes, I agree with that. 255 AD. Let me back up and see what you're referring to here. Do you think that's a good premise for a sci-fi universe? You have to colonize systems slowly, but once you're there, you can get home instantly with a space gate. I guess there's no problem with that. I mean, again, like I'm more interested in what story is taking place in that universe than how the universe functions in that way. So, I mean, it would depend on the story, but yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. And it's a way to get around, you're not exactly doing faster than light travel, but you are still introducing some plot contrivances, to explain how people can get from place to place without taking forever. It's kind of a middle ground, I guess. Terminal Geek says, you got a raid much earlier in the stream, but you also got a new member message too much earlier too. Well, I'm sorry I missed the raid. Here's a super chat from Isaiah. I'm going to wear my shuttle cosplay to Infinity Con here in Tallahassee in July, and then Kennedy Space Center in October. They have a shuttle launch simulator. I hope to win the cosplay contest. That is awesome. And seriously, it's a really, really cool cosplay. I'm very impressed with it. Daryl Lett says, okay, Steve, I see you have a new cap. I don't recognize the emblem, though. What does it represent? It is the great flag of the state of Maryland, my friend. That's what the emblem is. It is a patch representing the great flag of the state of Maryland, which, as everybody knows, is the best flag. Not just the best state flag, but the best flag. Black Cover 95 says, any chance you'd review holodeck episodes from Lower Decks? They're worth talking about, in my opinion. Not for the retro reviews, because the retro reviews are about shows from previous production eras of the Star Trek franchise. So I would not be reviewing holodeck episodes as a part of that. And I really don't expect to be making videos about Lower Decks for any reason going forward. It's just not a show that interests me. And unless I come up with a really good idea for it, or there's a reason like to mention it as a part of a larger video, like if there's a reason to refer to it as part of a larger argument I'm making, of course I'll do that. I won't like pretend that it doesn't exist, but I have no interest in making videos specifically about it because I don't particularly enjoy the show. Jonathan Stewart says, quick question. Is Bashir an unethical doctor? Just thinking about him being in a relationship with at least two of his patients that I can recall. I would say you could argue that he was acting unethically in those instances, but I think we see other examples of him throughout the series that show that he's mostly quite ethical. He just, he has those occasional lapses where the ladies are concerned. 285 AD question, that scene in Picard, are we meant to agree with the Admiral or him? I mean, he resigned in protest of Starfleet not helping the Romulans more, and he ended up being right. I think we're supposed to be more with Picard than with the Admiral, just because Picard is the point of view character. And you're right. I mean, he did resign for a principled reason, but I do also think we're meant to be able to see the Admiral side of it. I mean, look at how it feels from her perspective. Here comes this guy who quit years ago, who walked out on Starfleet, and now here he comes waltzing back in, expecting to be given everything he wants to go do this mission, right? Like from her perspective, she's like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? So even though I feel like we're meant to mostly be on Picard's side, one of the potentially interesting things that the Picard show tries to do, mostly just in season 1, unfortunately, and it doesn't totally succeed with this in season 1, but it tries to humanize Picard by showing us that, he is not the great man of history that I think certain fans of TNG want to lionize him as, that he has faults, that he has shortcomings, that he is not right about everything, that he is in certain ways a man who is no longer of his time. He is a figure of yesterday as opposed to a figure of the present. And that doesn't mean that he no longer has value, or he isn't important, or he isn't heroic, or he can't be a role model. It just means that, he is no longer the Jean-Luc Picard of 30 years ago. And the show tries to show us that. Doesn't really succeed, but it makes an attempt, and it shows characters being frustrated with him. It shows characters feeling let down by him. And it makes an attempt to do some of that. And I feel like the Admiral scene is part and parcel of that, right? Like I said, it doesn't really pull it off, but at least it tries, and seasons 2 and 3 don't really try as much at that as season 1 does. And that's a shame, because that's one of the few genuinely interesting angles on Picard himself specifically that the Picard show plays with. Me No Other says, shame that Discovery and Lower Decks are ending after season 5, but we have Strange New Worlds for 2 more seasons and Starfleet Academy. I mean, I am mostly a fan of Discovery, so I suppose I can say it's a shame. But I mean, 5 years is a pretty good run, especially in today's environment. Like 5 years for a streaming show, especially on a second or third tier streaming service like Paramount Plus, that's pretty good. You know, that's pretty good. So I mean, as a fan of Discovery in particular, not really a fan of Lower Decks, but as a fan of Discovery in particular, I really can't complain. I mean, you can always say it's a shame when a show you like ends, but I can't really feel like I haven't, you know, I can't feel like I've been ripped off or like I've had something stolen from me. Like 5 seasons is a pretty good run. 255 AD says, do you worry the far right rich might try to take over all mainstream non-independent media? Yeah. Yeah. CMX says, Steve is younger than me and such a grumpy old man. And I'm a grumpy old man. Ooh, the raid. That's viewers, man. Yeah, I completely missed it. Because I was answering questions from my supporters. I was answering questions from the people who were good enough to give me money to do this. I was paying attention to them, not to a bunch of jackoffs in the chat. Not you jackoffs. The jackoffs who did the raid, apparently, that I missed. Not you wonderful, beautiful, amazing jackoffs who are watching this right now. Me No Other says, I never understood the whole colony ship concept. If you build an Earthling mothership, why not live on the ship? Don't strip mine a new world just to colonize when you have a ship. Well, that's, I mean, that is one perspective, of course, but it is definitely not the perspective that Calgon took during Space Mutiny. He believed he was destined to set foot on a real world. Not to rule on a ship, but to rule on a planet. So, you know, there's 2 sides to it. Let's see. 255 AD says, why are the Dems good at camping but unwilling to take radical stances? They have a really big tent. I wish they were more willing to take not even just radical stances, but just bold progressive stances. I don't necessarily need them to be radicals. Like, I just need them to be committed to being progressives. You know, like that would be fine with me. If my party, the Democratic Party, were just committed to being the progressive party, we're good. Like, you know, I don't need them to be radicals. I need them to be progressive. I don't know. Is a raid a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know what the fuck when people from another, I don't know. I just do a show, man. I just do a show. Sometimes I feel like David Letterman. You know what I mean? Like, remember, like latter era Dave, when he was kind of done and he knew he was no longer like the innovator. He was just kind of doing like the thing, right? I feel like David Letterman sometimes. I'm like, I'm working in a medium where the style and the fashion and the cutting edge has kind of passed me by, and I'm still doing my thing my way, and other people are doing other things in newer and fresher, more exciting ways. And I'm just like, oh, well, good for them. Good for them. Anyway, yes, we put our faith in Blast Hard Cheese. Andrew Klang, I second this. I don't know what just happened to the chat widget. Let me refresh it. Refresh chat widget. Speaking of modern technology, good old-fashioned chat widget. That's all you need. There it is. It's back. All right. Anyway, Andrew Klang says, regarding Picard, I will always respect series that question the paragon, the idol, rather than just further elevate them, and in so doing the past/status quo. More Last Jedis, less Rises of Skywalkers is. I agrees is. Yeah, Isaiah, that was it. The Siege. I saw you posted on Facebook about that. Jonathan Stewart, Discovery is only running for 5 years because Paramount is stealing from J. Michael Straczynski. Yeah, I mean, I wish they would have stolen the coherent plot line from him. Not the thing is, like, Straczynski was able to mostly pull off. I mean, Babylon 5 isn't perfect, but Babylon 5 in general is a really, really good show that still holds up. And with Babylon 5, especially for the first 4 years, and really for me, most especially in seasons 2, 3, and 4, like the middle chunk of it when it was really, really good, he did not only season-long story arcs, but also story arcs that spanned seasons, that tied the entire series together. Discovery, even though they have tried, and bless their hearts, they've tried. And like I say this as a fan of Discovery, I like Discovery, but boy, its biggest failing has always been its attempt at serialized storytelling. It has never been able to pull it off for a single season successfully, let alone tie the entire show together. So Babylon 5, I wish they would have borrowed that bit from Babylon 5. Don't worry, Kara. I got the chat back. I knew y'all were going to lose it. I knew y'all were going to freak out when the chat disappeared, but I fixed it. Well, thank you, Air One Fire, and thank you to all the people who's from the other stream who came to this one. I don't know wherever they came from. God bless you. Yannick Muller says, hey, is it weird to you that you feel so close to your best friend Jason without ever meeting him in person? Do you feel like you're missing things? Please ignore if this is too personal. I mean, look, if Jason lived closer, of course I'd want to see him in person. I mean, and one of these days either he's going to come here or I'm going to go there. Like I would love for us to be together in person at some point. You know, like I do feel like, of course it's different when you're together physically. Right? Like you're always missing stuff if you're just having a long distance thing. So of course I would love to be able to hang out with him in the same room, you know? I'd love for us to be able to go places together, to hang out. Like, of course I'm missing out on stuff. But you know, the friendship itself is based in the fact that you like each other, you have things in common, you know, we do spend time together in a way, not in the same place, but you know, over on the phone or over like a Zoom call or stuff like that. Like, so it's not weird to me that there's a feeling of closeness. It's not strange to me that I consider him my best friend. That part isn't strange to me. But yes, of course it would be better if we were able to be, you know, actually in the same place. Kara says, do you think Straczynski had a plan for the ending even while he was writing the beginning? Maybe not while he was writing the beginning, but I think he did have a general outline for how he wanted the show to go. Like by the time he got to the point where he was pitching it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he had the ending right as soon as he had the beginning, but yeah, I do think he mapped out an entire series storyline as a part of his writing process. I'm not sure how long that took. I don't know all of the details, but I know that he had a long-term plan for it. You know, certainly by the time the first season went into production, and that had to change. Like he's talked openly about the fact that, you know, as the show actually was made, there were changes made. It's not like the show turned out exactly like he planned it. There was an organic process that took place where, maybe there were practical concerns where actors would come and go and he'd have to make changes, or maybe a particular character popped a lot more strongly than he thought it would, and he would change the story a little bit to make more space for this character, to let this character that bloomed, have more room to shine, to mix my metaphors there. But yeah, but overall I think he had a general plan for how it was supposed to go. Steve Schmeling, I realized something. Trek 5 has a trifecta. Beginning had a sandstorm, credits had rock climbing, and Cybox, I Feel Your Pain is deep hurting. Deep hurting. You're right. You're right. And I believe perhaps for those reasons, it is arguably the most mist-worthy Star Trek film. I think if we were going to do a mystery science theater treatment of any Star Trek movie, Star Trek 5 would be the obvious first choice. 255 AD says, do you think the far right are going to take over ABC or the Times or the Guardian or CNN or whatever other mainstream lib news source? I mean, I don't have any specific expectations that they are about to take over any of those. But I mean, there is, to me, there's already too much far right influence on all of them. I mean, with CNN especially, it's frustrating because I think CNN wants, CNN doesn't want to be seen as the leftist news channel or the liberal news channel. Like, it wants to be middle of the road. And it feels like in order to do that, it needs to give more deference to the Republican side. And I just think that's terribly dangerous in the current political climate. So that kind of, I mean, that's not even, like right wingers buying the network or asserting direct control over it. That's just misguided people in charge of it, making what I consider to be bad decisions while chasing a certain kind of credibility. Arrow on Fire, I'm glad you could join us. Oh, God, you've already found the story of film. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it's something of what you were looking for. Glad you could be here. Kane 20C, Deathmatch Time, Kurt Russell edition, RJ McCready or Jack Burton. This is surprisingly easy because even though I love The Thing, and I think The Thing is a better movie overall than Big Trouble, Jack Burton. Jack Burton I would choose over RJ McCready. Yeah. I love Jack Burton so much. I love that character so much. I love Kurt Russell in that movie so much. Jack Burton all the way. I love that he does almost everything wrong for the entire movie. And then near the end, he does this one incredibly badass thing where he catches the knife and throws it right back and kills the bad guy. It's like he's been nothing but a big talking, swaggering fuck up the entire movie. This great like parody of an 80s action hero, which is hilarious. And Kurt Russell is fantastic. And then, like, when it matters the most, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just does this unbelievably badass thing. It's just great. I love it so much. Isaiah and Geek, I'm on the side of the student protesters, and I think it sucks that the cops are tear gassing them. I think it's outrageous that it's the same thing that happened with the Black Lives Matter protests a few years ago. A mostly peaceful protest is being treated as a violent protest by people who want it to be a violent protest. So they have an excuse for breaking it up and, arresting people and tear gassing them or whatever. And it's not just people on the far right. It's people in the center and even somewhat, not all the way on the left, but people who politically are generally more leftish than on the right. Um, because of things like APAC and the undue influence of the Israeli government in our on our politics, and the how toxic it is to no matter how legitimate your criticism of the political and military policies of the state of Israel may be, there are people who just are so invested in painting all of that, no matter how measured and thoughtful and specifically targeted it is. All of that is painted as anti-Semitic and therefore discredited. And any kind of protest of Israel, even when it's a protest of Israel trying to wipe out an entire population of people, as is happening in Gaza, it's treated as, it's violent protesters and it's anti-Israel and it's anti-Semitic and it's anti-American and blah, blah, blah. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And it's incredibly telling, by the way, that all the fucking free speech warriors on the right who are all about, well, people should be allowed to say whatever they want. People should be allowed to speak their minds. What about free speech? What democracy depends on free speech. And they're fucking silent, or they're explicitly taking the sides of the people who are trying to jail and tear gas and discredit those protesters. How about that? That's weird, huh? It's almost like they don't actually care about free speech at all. Kara, no, I don't think that's odd. Kara says, do you think all writers watch or read something and think, what if X had happened instead of Y? No, I don't think that's unusual. No, I don't think that's unusual at all. In some cases, it can be a sign that the thing you're asking that question about is a good story because you've become that invested in it. Of course, it can also be a sign that it's a bad story because you weren't happy with how it went and you thought, wait a minute, why did this happen instead of this? If this had happened instead of that, then the story could have gone this way and that would have been better, and then you're sort of imagining your own story in your head, which isn't exactly a fair comparison. And I've talked about that a lot in videos, but I mean, no, I don't think that's unusual. I think that's completely normal to do. It's so normal to do that when I'm writing a review, sometimes I have to specifically tell myself not to do that because I don't think that when I'm acting as a critic, I don't think that's a critic's job. I don't think it's a critic's job to pitch a hypothetical rewrite of the thing they're reviewing. I think it's a critic's job to review and analyze and react to the thing that they just watched or read or whatever the case may be. But I think, yeah, I mean, outside of that, I think it's completely natural to imagine like different ways a story could have gone. Yeah, Steve, exactly. They're using their freedom wrong. Of course, they're using their freedom incorrectly. Unum secundum velit. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, there is no greater ally at this point to anti-Semites than fucking Netanyahu. You're absolutely right. All right, I see Geek posting the links in the chat, and that's perfect timing because it is just about time for me to wrap this baby up. So if anybody has any final thoughts or questions you want to throw in the chat that I can come back to in a minute right before we close things out, please do so now because I'm going to do my customary end of the show plugs and such, and then I'll take one last peek at the chat, and then we will call it a night. So first of all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching and for the questions and for everything. And if you enjoy this YouTube stuff that I do and you are not currently a supporter and you would like to become one to help me continue to do this, you can either become a patron by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives or click the join button to become a channel member. Either way, one of the benefits of both being a patron and a member is that you get to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams where you can ask a question, one of the questions that I answer in the first part of the show. I give priority to pre-submitted patron and member questions. So patreon.com/Steve Shives or click the join button for any level from $1 a month on up to however much you can afford and however much you think I'm worth. All patrons and members get to submit questions for Ask Away. So please consider that and consider supporting the channel if you enjoy what I do. Also, don't forget that in addition to the YouTube thing, I'm also on a couple of podcasts hosted by the great Jason Harding, who is my aforementioned best friend. I am on the Late Seating podcast with Jason, which is a movie review podcast where we take a look at a classic film and see if it deserves its reputation, be it good or bad. Our new episode of Late Seating is out this week. You can listen to it right now, and it is our review of the original classic 1956 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So give that a listen right now if you want to hear a really fun, hilarious, and hopefully insightful movie review podcast. Also, I am a cast member on the Ensign's Log, which is the Star Trek themed comedy podcast, improv comedy podcast that I do alongside Jason and alongside Dana Cole, who was with us in the chat earlier. I think Dana went to bed or something. I might have missed that. But anyway, haven't seen Dana's name for a while. But Dana and Jason and I are on the Ensign's Log, where we play original characters that sort of exist in the Star Trek universe, and stuff from Star Trek shows kind of happens in the sidelines or in the background of our stories while we have our own things happening on the show. It's a really, really fun show to do. Hopefully, if you enjoy the Star Trek themed videos that I do on this channel, you would appreciate and enjoy the Ensign's Log. So please check it out if you haven't before. And also, one last programming note. Also, don't forget, Geek was putting the links in the chat. Please also don't forget charitylinks.page to help some friends of ours who need a helping hand financially. You can use charitylinks.page to find all of those links. And Geek also put a bunch of them in the chat just now. And one final programming note. This weekend is the monthly live hangout for patrons and members. That's another benefit that all patrons and members can take advantage of. It is first come, first serve, and I do limit the number of people in the Zoom call. Usually, if there are a total of 13 of us in there at once, I lock the meeting so nobody else can come in, and it's always a little chaotic because we all there are a couple of regulars, or there are several regulars that usually are in there with me every month, and we all like to talk and we all have our piece to say. So there's, it can get a little chaotic, but to keep it from getting completely unmanageable, I usually lock the meeting at a maximum of 13 people. But that is something that if you are a patron supporter or a channel member, that you can potentially join me with as well. We hang out beginning at noon Eastern on the last Sunday of every month for about an hour, sometimes longer. And it's just something that I do with my supporters, just to have fun and show my appreciation and get to hang out with some of the folks who support this channel and make what I do possible to do. So that's this Sunday starting at noon Eastern. It's live streamed on the channel. Anybody can watch it, but if you are a patron or a channel member, you get the link to actually join the Zoom call. All right, that is it for the show, everybody. Let me take one last peek at the live chat and see what we have here. Denzel Rogers says, I've been a fan for a long time. What do you think of Operation Exodus Mississippi campaign? Also, do you think Candace Owens is a grifter? I don't think I know what Operation Exodus Mississippi campaign is, but do I think Candace Owens is a grifter? Yes, very much so. Kara, you says, thanks for reading my question and good night. Well, thank you for asking it and for being here, Kara. I appreciate it. And good night to you too. John Collins, at what level do people have to be members to ask questions answered early? Any member. Any level from $1 on up. Everybody who is a supporter as a member or a patron gets to submit questions early if they want. Corwin K says, how long have you been a very active trans ally? Found you from your review of the season 2, episode 2 of Strange New Worlds and just felt excited by your trans support. For a good while, for pretty much as long as I've been aware that trans people were a group and were, being mistreated. Like for a while now, for over a decade at least, I would say. Yeah. Oh, Steve says, I recently introduced my wife to Benson and she loves it. Great writing. You ever watch it, like it? Also, are the comments you address in the not actually track actually comments from patrons and channel members? No, the comment responses are just taken from everybody. Some of them are channel members or patrons, but it's not a requirement. It's whatever comments I find that I think I have an interesting response to. And yes, I haven't watched Benson for a really long time, but I remember watching it when it was originally on. And I liked it. I always liked Benson. Yeah. So I always thought I thought it was cool from the very beginning of Deep Space Nine when it was Rene Auberjonois playing Odo, because of course I knew him as Clayton Endicott III from Benson. Yeah. And yeah, I do not have a Discord. People are asking about a Discord. I do not have a Discord because yes, I do not have time. Geek is completely right. I don't have time to manage it. And I don't know if anybody else would have time to manage it either. And yeah, can people listen to Late Seating on Podbean? I'm not sure, John. I've never tried to listen to it on Podbean. I'll have to ask if you can't find it on there. I'll have to ask Jason. Jason is the one who handles the actual distribution of the podcast. He does actually all the work. Daryl says, how do I find your page on the Patreon app? I would imagine just searching for my name, just searching for Steve Shives would probably bring me up. And yeah, Azalea, that's a good point. If I did prioritize supporters for the comment responses, there's no, except unless if it's someone that I specifically know is a patron. If it's someone who's a patron, but I don't necessarily recognize their YouTube handle on site, then yes, that would be unfair to prioritize channel members over patrons, because I try to keep them even because they're equally important to me. I love you all. I love you all equally. I love the ones of you who give me money more than the ones who don't give me money. But but of the ones who give me money, I love them all equally, except for the ones who give me more money than some of the other ones. What I'm saying is I love you all a specific and fair amount that is directly linked to the amount of money that you give me every month. But it's all genuinely out of love. And I do love and value all of you to a certain degree. All right. All right. Thanks everybody. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm just kidding. I love all of you no matter what, even if you're not a patron or a member, just the fact that you watch and it maybe even occasionally share the video or, whatever, leave a comment. I'm super grateful to have all of it. I feel incredibly lucky that I get to do this for a living. Thank you all so much. Very liberal. I know. Yeah. And I know you mean that as a compliment, Azalea. She says, very liberal of you. Thank you all so much for being with me. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. I will see hopefully some of you on Sunday for the patron and member hangout. And yeah, that's it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.